Matt Naps, and today we're going to be breaking down the entire UFC 264 card. Well, not the entire thing, kind of picking and choosing fights. We'll go over every fight a little bit, but most of them we'll just kind of touch on. And then breaking down kind of the more interesting stuff that happened over the course of the day. And we'll discuss how I did on the predictions earlier. So, starting off with the early prelims, I went 3-0 with my predictions. Actually, sorry, 2-1 with my predictions. I believe. Did I have Tavares or Akhmedov? Let me look. Who did I have here? Okay, yeah, I did. So yeah, I went 2-1. So obviously, Zalgas went pretty much similar to how I expected it would. Not entirely. Obviously, I was talking about his win over Ali Bogatinov, which is, an insanely impressive win. I was expecting him to beat Jerome Rivera, but, obviously 2 minutes into the fight was insanely impressive. Tavares and Omari, that was the one I got wrong on these prelims. So, kind of shocking to me, but it was a close fight, good back and forth fight, interesting fight. Jennifer Maia versus Jessica Ai. That one I did get right. That one was a little bit closer than I expected. I kind of expected Maia to go out there and really dominate her, but I didn't do too bad. She arguably won the one round. Middleweight. Moving on to the prelims. These ones I was 2-2 on. So thankfully, Dricus, the Dutchman, he ended up winning his fight. Very proud of that, obviously, because I'm part Dutch. Then Ryan Hall versus Topuria. So I wasn't too familiar with Topuria, but I've gone back and watched some of his fights since then, and he's definitely a very impressive prospect. Just blasted Ryan Hall. Ryan kept going for that Imanari role. Usually works for him. Really didn't end up working for him this time, obviously. He ended up getting caught and flattened. So, it's unfortunate. I'm a big Ryan Hall fan, so hopefully he bounces back and we see him, back in the cage sometime soon. I think he's a pretty smart guy, so he'll probably take at least 6 months off because they usually recommend about 6 months after you've been knocked out. So I assume he'll take the recommended time just because he is a smarter guy. Tends to be more cerebral fighter. So I expect him to be back sometime around the end of the year, maybe next year. And the good thing about this for him, at least, is now that he's been knocked out, a lot of guys are going to be a lot less afraid of him. Ironically, in a roundabout way, this might actually get him to a title shot faster, depending on how he performs in his fights after this. Because had he gone out there and done the exact same thing to Ilya that he'd done to everyone else, Hall would still be feared by everyone, and he'd probably still not be able to get a top 10, top 15 fight. But now that he's been beaten, he might actually, ironically, he might get a top 15 guy for his next fight. So it's kind of funny, but him losing literally might be the best thing that ever happened to him in terms of his career, just because it'll make people far less afraid of him. Michael Pereira versus Nico Price. Really, really good fight. It didn't end up winning performance or fight of the night. That was the O'Malley fight, but it was definitely a close one. In terms it was close for the fight of the night. If Moutinho hadn't been such a glutton for punishment, that he probably would have. These two probably would have got it. Great back and forth. Obviously, Pereira came out guns blazing in that first round, just kind of put it on him. Price turned it back towards him in the second round. I don't know if he got the takedown or if it was a guillotine jump attempt. I can't exactly remember. Ended up getting to the ground somehow. Price dominated the fight on the ground for the majority of the second round, and then you get back to the third round and it's on the feet, on the ground, against the cage, just going at each other, and Pereira seemed to get the better of that. And 29-28 unanimous decision. I agree with the decision, but such a good back and forth fight, such a great fight. Not much else to say about that. Good job for both of them. Moving on to Max Griffin versus Carlos Condit. I picked Condit to win this one. Not really sure what to say other than good job by Griffin coming out really hard right off the start. Seemed to put Condit on his back foot, and he never really got things going again after that. He kind of did a little bit in the third round, but he was just always kind of on his back foot, and he really didn't seem like he was ever able to get that pace going the way he wanted to, and take the fight back. Max came at him really hard at the start, and after that he was always just like slightly one step ahead of Carlos, and that's a really impressive win for him, especially at his age. I think Max is something like 36 years old, 35. He's 35 years old. Condit's obviously older as well, 37. But for Max to be able to get a win off of a big guy like Condit, a former welterweight champion or interim welterweight champion, that'll really move him up in the rankings. I don't know if they did, but if I check the top 10, top 15 rankings right now, I really wouldn't be surprised if they've already moved him into those rankings, just because they haven't. But Condit was one of those guys that's just outside of those rankings, even though he's not really at a place that he used to be. So it's a really amazing win for Max, and I think that'll be one of the best things to happen to his career again. So good for him. Congratulations. Moving on to the main event. The main event, I ended up going 4-1. So the one I did get wrong was the women's fight, but we'll get to that in a second. Starting with Sean O'Malley versus Chris Moutinho. I wasn't too familiar with Chris going into this fight, to be honest, and I think I was kind of right. My prediction was essentially that he fed this guy to Sean because they're trying to build Sean into a big star. You put him on the McGregor undercard. Look, he's kind of like a younger, slightly less brash McGregor because he likes to smoke weed and he's a little more chill. He's like McGregor meets Snoop Dogg, right? Like he doesn't, he's McGregor if he fucking smoked weed instead of snorted rails, pretty much, right? And that's really what they're trying to market him as. And, so Moutinho obviously was kind of fed to the, was a lamb going to slaughter. But it was really impressive by Sean O'Malley and honestly Moutinho himself. Moutinho is probably one of the toughest son of bitches to ever live. Like, I think O'Malley ended up breaking the record for the most significant strikes in a 3-round fight, and that was in 30 seconds shy of what should have been a full 3-rounder. And Moutinho took it all. Like he honestly, it was arguably a late, early stoppage. He was getting the shit kicked out of him, but like he just kept taking it, and it didn't, like, other than at the end of the first round, which he seemed to have recovered from, it really didn't look like he was in danger. Maybe in danger of long-term CTE, but in terms of like immediate damage from the fight, not really. And obviously they always say, you got to be protecting yourself, but if you're protecting yourself from long-term CTE, then you shouldn't even be in there. So then there's an argument to be made that whoever lands the first punch automatically wins, right? I think it's kind of ridiculous that they didn't let that fight go on, at least for the 20 seconds that was left. But good job by O'Malley anyway. Really impressive win, and kind of what I expected to happen, but good job by Moutinho for being so tough, man. Next one up was Irene versus Yana. So I actually had Yana winning this one, and for about the first minute and a half, 2 minutes of the fight, it looked like that was exactly what was going to happen. Yana came out swinging. She was, kind of looked to be too fast, too big, too strong, especially in the striking department for Irene to do anything. And then next thing she's on her back and she's getting her face smashed in. It was, really quick switch, quick turn of the events. And once Irene was on top of Yana, she really wasn't able to get her off. I imagine this won't affect Yana too negatively just because Irene missed weight. But it's probably a good thing that Irene missed weight, or a bad thing. It's a good thing for Yana, obviously, that Irene missed weight because, then the loss looks much less worse because this girl's almost a full weight class above her. But it's still a loss. And as for Irene, obviously, missing weight's never good. Looks bad, like they're probably not going to give you a title shot at 35 unless you can prove that you can make weight 2 or 3 times in a row now, which means even though you beat one of the girls who's, more notable, she's fought for the 45-pound title, you kind of shot yourself in the foot where, they can't trust you to make weight anymore, so, like, they can't really give you a title shot, right, unless you have 2 or 3 fights and prove that you can make weight. So I assume that's, probably what they're going to do with her, either move her up to 45 or, maybe give her 2 or 3 contenders in a row because she's kind of shot herself in the foot in that sense. moving on to the heavyweights, we got Tai Tuivasa versus Greg Hardy. Real quick fight. Minute and 7 seconds. Hardy caught Tai. Tai countered, caught him, knocked him out. Essentially just one, really quick flurry, like a little bit of feeling each other out at the start and then just instantly right into it. It was, really short, explosive fight. And pretty much what I expected, to be honest. I said this fight would come down to, Hardy's size and athleticism versus Tai's technique, and, Hardy tried to get into a striking match with him. A guy who comes from a kickboxing and boxing background, who comes from a family that has produced tons of world-class kickboxers and boxers. Like, this isn't just like a first-generation guy. You're talking about a guy who's got like generations and generations of his family have done this, and you try to go in there as just a guy who's relying solely on your athleticism and almost kind of bragging about how untechnical you are, and then you get knocked out in a minute, and it's not really surprising. It's exactly what I expected. Then we move on to Gilbert Burns versus Stephen Thompson. So I would say I was slightly surprised about this. I did expect Burns to win, but not as decisively, and especially not as dominantly on the ground. Not that Burns isn't good on the ground. Obviously, he's got world-class jiu-jitsu. It's just that jiu-jitsu guys tend to not be the best at holding guys down, at least not compared to wrestlers. And Thompson in the past has been shown to be able to get up from most of the best wrestlers. Really, the only guy that's been able to hold him down is Woodley. Everyone else that's ended up beating him. Pettis was striking. Who else is Thompson lost to? I think he's just got the Woodley loss and the Thompson. He's got one more. Darren Till, yeah. So Darren Till, which I cannot remember how that fight went. I'd have to rewatch that fight. Matt Brown was obviously a mix fight, I guess you could say. It was kind of like a mix of everything. But kind of really mixed it up. But yeah, Burns was the first guy, or not the first guy, but the first guy that was not like a really, really, good wrestler that was able to do that. Or I guess maybe, you could just say he had underrated wrestling, because obviously he is a good wrestler. He kind of proved that because he was able to hold Stephen Thompson down in a way that, better wrestlers, on paper, better wrestlers couldn't. Proving that, again, grappling is grappling. A lot of these top-level jiu-jitsu guys would be top-level wrestlers if they transferred over. A lot of the top-level wrestlers would be top-level jiu-jitsu guys. Obviously, some of that depends on body type, because there's different advantages in the different sports with certain body types. But, on average, you have those really athletic guys that are, kind of like that stockier build. That tends to, dominate both grappling, or I guess all grappling, right? That build, tends to dominate. So, anyway, moving on to the main event, Poirier versus McGregor. So obviously, probably the most hyped fight of the year. Disappointing in some ways how it ended, because I'm not really disappointed how it ended in a sense, because Poirier was really putting it on him and beating the shit out of McGregor, but you've seen after, even at the press conference, people were saying 1-1-1 and stupid shit like this. So it's not bad because, it's bad for McGregor because he broke his fucking leg. But it's not bad for the show necessarily, except for the fact that McGregor attracts so many fanatical casual fans, right? A lot of other athletes attract casual fans, but the casual fans that McGregor attract have this need to pretend that they're hardcore and gatekeep for a community that they're barely a part of. And I think that's what's so cancerous about them, is that, while a lot of other fighters, including the Diaz brothers, do bring a lot of the casual fan base in and the mainstream fan base in, they're not as cringy as McGregor fans, right? McGregor has, and like this is coming from a guy who's a McGregor fan. Some of the McGregor fans are the cringiest people on the planet because they clearly have no fucking idea what they're talking about, but they have no problem spouting off just this random shit as if it's their area of expertise. And I guess like it's good and it's bad. Like it's good in a sense because the more people that are watching the sport, the better for the sport. But it's definitely annoying. I guess you could call it growing pains. But yeah, he's definitely got a large percentage of his his fan base, especially like his hardcore. I guess you could call them hardcore casuals, right? Like they're hardcore McGregor fans. So they're just kind of casual UFC fans, right? They don't really watch MMA events unless McGregor's in them, but they probably follow his social media feed religiously, like those kind of guys. But anyway, just dominant performance by Poirier for the most part. The start, pretty good back and forth. Conor caught him with a couple of good kicks, some low kicks, some thigh kicks. He was working that calf kick, working that fucking traditional Thai kick as well, to the thigh. And, really for the first, I'd say 30, 40 seconds, McGregor was probably actually getting the better of the fight. And then once they clinched up, Dustin just took over. He got him against the fence, took him down, he didn't even take him down. McGregor jumped guillotine, which was a really big mistake. And then that actually, and in retrospect, that might have been because his fucking ankle was hurting. Because it seems that the fracture was caused by a kick at some point. I've seen a couple different videos of which kick it might be. But there's a couple kicks where his knee seems to, or not his knee, his shin seems to bend a little bit, suggesting that there was at least a partial fracture from a kick, if not multiple kicks, possibly a small one, then, got bigger and then got bigger. And then, next thing you know, he steps on it, cracks completely. But that being said, essentially once they, clinched up, it was just one-sided, right? Like Poirier was just able to put it on him and, just feed it to him on the ground. McGregor did get, a couple elbows, maybe 5 or 6 good elbows off the ground, but most of the striking was Poirier's, and just all-around dominant performance for Poirier. And so I guess what's next for these guys? Poirier, obviously, he'll be fighting for the title next against Oliveira. I think he most likely wins that fight, but again, Oliveira's no slouch. I think he's a bit longer than Poirier. I'll have to double check that, but I think Oliveira is one of the longer guys in the weight class. I think he's got a pretty long reach for his height. He's actually one of the few guys that's definitely got better jiu-jitsu than Poirier. So he's 5'10", 74-inch reach versus 5'9", 72-inch reach. Yeah, so he is a little bit bigger than Poirier, not too much. But yeah, so anyway, that'll be an insanely interesting fight. Possibly really good jiu-jitsu match. Both these guys are really well-rounded, but come from jiu-jitsu backgrounds. Both are black belts. I definitely think that's the next match to make. As for McGregor, he's probably going to be out for who knows how long. I'm going to guess 6 months to a year. And then I assume they'll probably do the Diaz 3 fight. Just because they'll want to bring him back right away. What they might do is they might give him some like really, really easy fight. Some guy they think is a hot prospect, but way, way, way too early. Because, and like this is what I would do if I were the UFC. You bring some guy in for McGregor to beat up that you think in 10 years might be a big deal, right? Some young 22, 23-year-old. If he beats McGregor, he's instantly a fucking star, right? If he loses, everyone kind of forgets about him. But then, if, you after this McGregor fight, you move him onto your regular ranking system and move him up the circuit, 5-10 years from now, you've got a story, especially like if McGregor is able to stick around. If McGregor's still one of the top dogs 5-10 years from now, which is debatable if he will be, then you bring, you have this kid versus McGregor. That being said, I don't know if they'll do that. I doubt they'll do that. I'd be very surprised if they do that. UFC tends to make which fight is hot now fights. They tend not to try and cook shit up and stew it, just because I think they realize a lot of the time that ends up shooting themselves in the foot, because you can never really, like, you can guess who's gonna win, but you can't decide the outcome. Yeah, I think give McGregor a gimme fight, then give him the Diaz fight, and then let him work his way back up to the title, because. And then there's also the chance that he just retires, or maybe he moves back down to 45. I mean, he could arguably just get a title shot right off the bat in 45, because he technically hasn't lost at 45. He's still the lineal champion, arguably. But yeah, that's about it. Yeah.